Hi there everybody, Mr. Brown here, and I'm back with The Snail Patrol by Krista Lacey, and we're going to read chapter 13. Slightly longer this one. There's a lot of action taking place. Here we go. It was going to be Darren's final stand. He didn't care how much trouble he might get into. He was going to make a statement. And what a statement. A crushing revelation. A message of protest to the whole wide world. Well, the residents of Pottledown Crescent anyway. He only hoped he had enough slime in his bucket. He began it on the pavement by George Macduff's hedge. George Macduff owes Darren Winterburn £21.50. At least that was what he intended to put. As it happened, he didn't get all the way through it. He was finishing the loop on the bottom of the pound sign when he took a step backwards and bumped into something. "Sorry," said Darren. "Cabbages," said the something. Darren stood bolt upright and dropped his brush. "Cabbages," he mouthed and looked over his shoulder. "Hello," said the giant snail. "Ah!" cried Darren and started to run. He ran without knowing where he was going, straight to the end of Pottledown Crescent, round the corner into Bobalong Drive, and then a quick sharp left up Tootle Road. He ran so fast his lungs were hurting, but if there was one thing Darren knew about snails, it was that snails never did anything fast. But this snail was different. This snail could motor. It was never more than a few metres behind him, and several times it drew alongside. "Stop," it kept saying. "No way!" screamed Darren, and turned without thinking down Orchard's Alley. Orchard's Alley was a dead end. Darren skidded to a halt. He had nowhere to go. The snail had him trapped against a solid brick wall with high wooden fences either side, and there was no hope of running back the way he'd come because the snail was almost as wide as the alley. What was the cabbage buster going to do? It sneezed, like a little flock of sparrows taking off, and every strand of Darren's hair stood straight to attention. "Sorry," said the snail. "It's all right," Darren squeaked. "Oh, cabbages," it said. "You don't half run fast." "So do you," Darren tremoured. "Please don't eat me." "Oh," the snail giggled. "I wouldn't do that. Little boys are made of puppy dogs' tails. Imagine eating a plateful of them." Darren grinned and made a sort of whimpering noise. If he remembered the rhyme correctly, little boys were made of slugs and snails and puppy dogs' tails, but he didn't think he ought to tell the cabbage buster that. He tried to look past it to shout for help. The cabbage buster dipped and swiveled its head. "See that?" it said. "What?" squealed Darren. "What?" Throwing himself so flat against the wall he could have been painted onto the bricks. "I can move my head any way I like. Up, down, and side to side. It's good, isn't it?" Brilliant," said Darren, turning his face away. The beast was toying with him, surely. Any minute now, it was going to squudge him or whatever giant snails usually did with their prey. The giant snail coughed. Darren winced. His fingernails clawed for a hold on the bricks. "Are you all right?" said the snail. "You look a bit peaky. I hope you're not going to get my cold." Peaky? Darren was more than a bit peaky. He was starting to sweat like a lump of cheese. He couldn't take much more of this. Perhaps if he just said sorry for the snail patrol, the cabbage buster might just leave him alone. "I didn't mean it," he blurted. "Honestly, I didn't. It was Mr. Macduff who wanted me to do it." "Do what?" said the snail. "Have you got a tissue?" "No," Darren tutted, a bit put out. What was it about this snail? Perhaps it snotted its victims to death. He tried again. I'm sorry I squashed your friends into jars." "Jars?" said the snail, with a giant-sized sniff. Jam jars?" said Darren, getting tetchier by the second. Honestly, this snail was completely thick. "Isn't that why you're after me? You wanted to get revenge because I caught a lot of snails and put them into jam jars and asked Mr. Macduff to pay for them." "What?" said the snail, rearing slightly. "Help!" Darren squealed, closing his eyes. I'll never do it again, I promise. Please don't squidge me. I'm a nice boy, really. I know, said the snail in a soppy sort of voice. Darren opened one eye. Hang on a minute. He knew that voice. It was the voice that made his ears start to wiggle. He opened both eyes and stared hard at the snail. The cabbage buster tilted its head rather shyly, and for the first time Darren noticed that the skin of the snail didn't seem as leathery as it ought to. If anything, it looked rather rigid and clean. Painted, even. A painted snail. He lifted a finger and touched its neck. It felt a bit like papier-mâché. Darren folded his arms and scowled. Boo! He went loudly up the snail's nose. Wah! Went the snail and nearly toppled over. Cabbages, snapped Darren. Sprouts, it laughed. Fake, Darren shouted, and rapped his knuckles on the cabbage buster's nose. There was a sharp, hollow, knocking sound. Tee-ho didn't feel a thing, it said. Darren stormed down the snail's side. Where are you? He shouted. I know you're in there. How did you get in? Come on, come out now. There was silence for a moment. The snail seemed to know the game was up. Promise not to pull my hair, it said. No, said Darren. Just a minute, said the snail, and slowly it reversed to the end of the alley. There was a click, and the door swung open in its shell. Darren stood back and gasped in amazement. I knew it. I knew it was you, he stamped. Sharon climbed off her bike and stood beside him. I only did it because you like snails. I hate snails, cried Darren. I hate them. I hate them. Sharon stroked the snail's neck and looked a bit miffed. But I saw you drawing some in class, and you asked me how to make slime. I hate slime too. But why? Said Sharon. Darren sighed and stubbed his toe against the ground. You'll laugh, he said. I won't, said Sharon, crossing her heart. She sat on a low wall and patted the space beside her. Darren slumped down and told her everything. But that's terrible, said Sharon a few minutes later. You've been swizzled. Mr. Macduff ought to pay you the money. Well, I know that, Darren grouched, but how can I make him? Sharon thought hard. She glanced at her snail, and a strange sort of smile lit up her face. And that's the end of chapter 13, and we'll have chapter 14 coming soon. Bye-bye.